Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge podcast. This is Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. Today's guest is Dr. Patricia E. Salkin. She is the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost of the Graduate and Professional Division of Touro University. She's also been a Dean of a law school, Touro, the Dean of the Touro University Jacob D. Fuchsberg Law Center, and she was Associate Dean and Director of the Government Law Center and a Distinguished Professor of Law at Albany Law School. Welcome so much to the program, Dr. Salkin.
Thank you, Patty. It's great to be here.
Well, I'm really thrilled to have you. You're my first provost, I think, that I have interviewed. And before we start to talk about the book that you've written that we're very excited about, May It Please the Campus, Lawyers Leading Higher Education, I wonder if you can tell me a little bit about your journey to your current position as provost in legal education.
Sure, thanks. I started out actually as a government lawyer in the state capitol in Albany and quickly realized that I wasn't going to change the world, which is what I thought, by taking that assistant counsel position right out of law school. And so I went back with the opportunity to Albany Law School to work as the assistant director at a research think tank called the Government Law Center, focused on legal aspects of public policy reform. And I stayed there from 1990 until 2012, moving up from assistant director to acting director to director, taught as an adjunct faculty member, joined the full-time faculty initially not on tenure track, and then moved to a tenured position, became an associate dean, all the while still running the Government Law Center, which was really my passion because that's where I fulfilled my reason for going to law school, which was if you had to follow the laws, you want to be a part of making the laws, making things better for society. And in 2012, I was recruited to consider the deanship at Touro Law Center. And I did join Touro Law Center in the summer of 2012. And at the end of my third year, the president asked if I would take on the additional responsibility as the acting or interim provost. And it turns out that in the end, he wanted me to be the provost. So I resigned from the deanship after 4 years and became the provost for the graduate and professional divisions in New York. And since that time, was promoted to the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs for our whole system, which is much larger than New York, while still focusing as provost for our New York graduate and professional schools.
So you brought with it, with your experience, you brought being a dean of a law school, but my understanding is Touro has many other disciplines. And so what is in your bucket of responsibilities as far as the graduate and professional schools now?
So I have a great job. Touro has 19,000 students. We are currently operating in 4 states, and our 5th state will be coming online this summer. We're opening up a new medical school in Montana, which is a project I've been intimately involved with. Across our schools, New York, California, Nevada, Illinois, and now Montana, we have 6 medical schools. We have 2 pharmacy schools. We opened up the first new dental school in New York in 50 years. That was one of my early projects as provost. We, of course, have the law school and then School of Health Sciences programs in 4 states that include physician assistants, nursing, speech and language pathology, mental health counseling, physical therapy, occupational therapy, PsyD. We have a social work school, a graduate school of business, graduate school of education, graduate school of technology. So,
wow.
I've learned a lot more about the complexities of accreditation and the curriculum from all kinds of different disciplines for just this government lawyer and land use and zoning professor.
Yes, well, your portfolio has certainly expanded, and you must learn a great deal about each of these disciplines. But I know that you enjoy being entrepreneurial, and it certainly sounds like you have the correct fit with Touro University is they have a lot of entrepreneurial activities in the medical and healthcare education space.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask is, while you're doing all of this work across this huge system of very diverse education programs, what prompted you to think about writing the book, May It Please the Campus?
So that's a great question, a wonderful story. Long before I got to Touro, I had thought about going on to earn a PhD or an EDD in higher ed leadership. And a friend of mine had mentioned to me that the University of the Arts in Philadelphia was starting a brand new PhD program in creativity. And it had just been approved by middle states, and they were opening up applications. And as a lawyer, that really sang to me, because I think part of what we do all the time is to be creative problem solvers and to think about things in different ways. And I always like putting the pieces of puzzles together. And so I had no idea what to expect, what the program was going to be, who was going to be in the program. And part of the application process was to pitch what our dissertation would be about, what we wanted to focus on, separate from the coursework and everything else that went along with the academic backdrop of the program. And I had noticed that when I was dean and on the ABA Dean's listserv, that there were a lot of deans that were becoming college and university presidents or moving up into the provost office, into other higher education opportunities, and nobody had studied it before. And I thought that it would be interesting. And so I took whatever data I had and used that for my application to make my pitch. I got accepted to the program, the only lawyer in the program, and everybody was not from higher ed in the program as well, and worked on my project for 3 years, and it was even bigger than I thought when I first started.
So what, well, I won't say what surprised you about it, because we'll talk about some of the details, but what made it bigger than you thought?
So nobody had collected the data. And so a big part of my contribution to knowledge for this project was to collect the empirical data to find out really how many presidents who were lawyers was there. And even in the first 6 months of the program, in reading the Chronicle of Higher Education and reading Inside Higher Ed, in class, I'd say, we had 2 more this week, or since the last time we met, we had another 3 or 4. And as the list, it just kept growing. And so I thought at one point when I started, hey, this is a trend, but I thought it was like contained, and I thought that the numbers would be around 100. And then, as we'll talk more, the numbers were just exponentially wild in my mind, and figuring out how to categorize all of these trends and how to track the data and what to look for once you were collecting the empirical data was really just, I've always wanted to do that empirical law review article. And I had my topic within the zoning and land use field and never did it. And with this, I was really able to satisfy my intellectual curiosity and my desire to deal with data.
Well, that's outstanding. And it's certainly a contribution to the profession, not only the legal profession, but just higher education generally. So I have noticed, just as you have, that more and more lawyers are being tapped to be presidents and provosts. And I just returned from the AALS meeting, and one of the sessions, they had an all-day advanced dean session, and one of the things they were talking about was, do you want to go on to be, after being a dean, a provost or president? So tell us a little bit about the numbers. Let's focus on the presidency first. You said there'd be like 2 more this week, another this week. Where do we stand currently at lawyers who become college or university presidents?
So based on where I'm at today, and the number is a moving target because I do still track it, even though the book is out. So we've identified 662 lawyers who have been college and university presidents, but collectively they've had 887 appointments.
Wow.
Meaning that some lawyer presidents have had more than one appointment. So, for example, E. Gordon Gee, who is the current president of the University of West Virginia, he's noted for having 7 presidencies at 5 different schools. 2 schools, University of West Virginia and Ohio State, brought him back after they had somebody else in the job when he left to go on to another school.
Wow. That's quite something. So of these lawyers turned college and university presidents, did you see any themes among the people who went on to seek the presidency?
So the greatest common denominator in the background of all of the lawyer presidents was that the overwhelming majority of them had government law experience. Some of them right out of law school. It could have been clerking. It could have been working for the military and JAG. A lot of them worked in state legislatures and Congress. Some worked in the White House. Some worked in the executive branch in state government. Some worked at local government. But I think the fact that so many had government law experience led me to a section in the book about what is it about government, the government law experience that creates some fertile ground for skill sets that would be interesting for campus presidents. The other trends that I found, really surprisingly, the number of law deans who became presidents is 118. But the number of law professors who became presidents was 177, which means you don't have to go through, traditionally, let's take lawyers aside for a minute. Traditionally, one thinks that the conventional path is become a professor in whatever discipline, become a department chair, become a dean, move over to central administration, work your way up in central administration and maybe learn the job all the way, and then you're ready to apply for a presidency.
Right.
And that is not the case with the lawyers who have become college and university presidents. I mean, it certainly is for some, but we have an equal number of stories of people who had no academic experience. 177 lawyer presidents had no prior academic experience before they became presidents of their campus. So what is it about the legal skill set and the business acumen and other things that made non-academic lawyers viable and desirable candidates for college and university presidencies?
I imagine you have a hypothesis or perhaps have come to a conclusion. What is that skill set?
I think it's a combination of things. I think, generally, I start with what I said earlier, that lawyers as a bunch are creative problem solvers, and that, we're generally called upon to fix things and to improve upon things. Lawyers as a group, and again, I'm giving you generalizations. We can all pick out the 1 or 2 exceptions that we know to things, but lawyers as a group are collaborators because we don't work alone. We have to work with our clients. We have to work with other lawyers in the office, whatever the setting is, public or private. And then we have to work with opposing counsel. And then we have to work with the courts. And so I think that we tend to know how to work well with others if we're good at what we do. We have an ability to collect the facts before we jump to conclusions, but to collect the facts quickly and to know what questions to ask. I think lawyers also know how to frame issues. A lot of what happens in higher education is crisis management. And so it's collecting the facts, but it's being able to have that conversation with your campus constituency and also with the public and with the media. And, lawyers that do litigation work. They're constantly framing the issues and constantly figuring out how to tell the story accurately, with passion, and in a way that you want the jury to hear it, or how you want the judge to hear it.
Right.
Lawyers also understand different perspectives, and we have room for that in the conversation. And I think most importantly, one of the skill sets that I think has been the reason for the resurgence of the interest in lawyer presidents is our ability to operate in a complex legal and regulatory environment. And the complexities have only increased from the 1950s to present.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that last point is certainly one very well taken. Even the dean positions have become much more, I think, consumed with the regulatory and compliance issues. As far as the lawyers who go on to be provosts, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So by and large, and I've just put up a blog post about this on my blog as well. Most of the provosts who are lawyers, were law school deans. And there's a section in the book that, although the book doesn't focus on provosts, it focuses on the growth of legal education. And so when, again, we start to think about the conventional or the traditional thoughts of who's available within higher education to move up within the academy, from the law faculty and deans and department chairs and so forth. When you think we have over 200 ABA approved law schools today, and that number really exploded several decades ago, you now have way more law professors than you ever had in the academy, and you have more associate deans and more deans. And this just provided an opportunity for law schools to be thought of like any other traditional discipline in the liberal arts, for example, in higher education. And I also think that in large part, some of the crises on the college and university campuses, again, back to the 70s. At one point in the 70s, the presidents of most, not all, but most of the Ivy League schools were lawyers, because we had Vietnam, we had sit-ins, we had lots of campus unrest, we had free speech issues, not unlike what we've been going through in the last 5 or 6 years, plus other kinds of issues, constitutional issues, the complexities of the HR world, the Title IX, all kinds of things that call for a different understanding and appreciation for working within that system. And I honestly liken it to during COVID-19. Not only did the number of lawyer college presidents increase, but the number of college presidents who were physicians or had degrees in public health noticeably increased. Because in large part, I think campus communities and their appointing authorities, the boards of trustees, they're looking for the right leader at the right time to deal with the crisis that the campus has in front of them.
That's really interesting. So you are a law dean who became a provost. And in making that transition, if we have law deans listening or law professors who aspire to be law deans, what differences on the macro level do you notice in the two positions? And is there anything that those who seek to become provosts might keep in mind to hone as far as their skills go and their compatibility with the position?
That's a great question. I like to refer to myself as the accidental provost, because the president found me. I didn't really find the position or seek it out. It's almost the same as the law school deanship. I envisioned myself as the law professor and running the research center and doing my scholarship until I couldn't do it anymore, because, that's what I was committed to. And when I became the dean at Touro Law Center, again, it appealed to sort of from the research center, the idea that you could be the builder or an architect of something, and that you could take things in a direction, again, and bringing the faculty along. You always have to do things together, but find those opportunities to create pathways for students and for society, because you want to put out products that are going to help people. And so whether that's through clinics and experiential learning, or whether it's through new curricular innovations. And if you take that in as the law school as a microcosm, and then you think about what you could do at the university-wide level, and think about all of these other disciplines, and then how everybody works together. And, one of the things that everybody talks about now, not just in the medical space, but growing beyond that, is the opportunity for interprofessional education and for cross-disciplinary collaboration as we deal with things like COVID-19 and other major public policy issues. My space, again, is land use and environmental law. So thinking about all of these things, it's not just for the lawyers, and it's not just for the scientists and for the healthcare professionals. It's for all of us to work together, and the opportunity to build that and to see where there are needs and how we can best serve students. It has just been really an incredible experience and opportunity. And so I'd say for law faculty that are interested in getting involved in administration, find leadership training programs, let the dean know that you're interested in administrative tasks. There's always committees and task forces. There are always assistant and associate dean positions and director positions at every law school. They're all different titles and so forth, but you can get involved with those things, understand admissions, understand different kinds of things. And then when there's opportunities to move up, and if you get involved, if you're on a campus, most of our law schools are on college and university campuses. Mm-hmm. We have very few remaining standalone private independent law schools. Branch out beyond just the law school and get involved in college and university-wide committees and meet colleagues in other disciplines and get yourself noticed.
Yeah, I have to say, as a law dean, anybody who tells me from the faculty they want to get involved in administration, I'm excited.
Exactly.
There's not a tremendously long line, so it's always good to learn of new talent, people who might be interested in the pathway. As far as lawyers who are considering leadership in higher education, if you're facing a fork in the road, and one is the presidency and one is the provost position, would you say that one should keep one in mind over the other, depending on certain characteristics they're looking for? And if so, what might they be?
So I think that for outsiders, for lawyers who are not in higher education, I think it's almost never that they're going to become a provost, because that's really the chief academic officer position, and you need that academic grounding in order to get there.
Yeah.
But the presidency is different. The presidency has changed. I think that we used to think, well, let me go back to the book starts in the 1700s in colonial America, and who were the early presidents of the early colleges that were being formed here, and they were either lawyers or ministers.
Right.
Again, the population was smaller, and the professions, were smaller, and that's who people were looking to. And then, as the colleges and universities grew, the academy kind of professionalized a little bit, and then we had these conventional pathways. And now I think that we're back to a period of a little unconventional time. The convention is still there, and the tradition is still there for many people, but I think we've opened to rather than thinking about higher education always as that ivory tower where, there are just thought leaders, and people doing philosophical kinds of work and very few people accessing higher education. Today, of course, we promote higher education as something that's really important for human development and something that's important for societal development and growth and knowledge. And so we encourage as many people as possible to go and pursue higher education and make sure that it's accessible to everybody. And so part of that, there's a little bit of a business aspect to that. And, that takes away the traditional president who, kind of like the law school dean, where, I don't know, when I was in law school, I always thought that the dean was like the smartest person on the faculty, and that's how they rose to that position. And today, I kind of I have a different view of higher education, and it is very much a business aspect to it because the faculty and the staff want to get paid, and the students who are our customers want to get value from their education, which means they care about the tuition, which means they care about if they're going to have a job waiting for them at the end. They're going to care about accreditation. They're going to care about a whole host of things that have nothing to do with what's the last law review article or book that you wrote.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes back to your comments earlier about creativity, right? And collaboration. You have to have your distinctive programs and your distinctive culture at your institutions, and those who maybe don't go through a traditional law professor path might have a broader view and bringing to presidency. So I wanted to ask, in the law dean positions in particular, there's been such a tremendous surge of female deans and diverse deans. Those who, we've expanded considerably with the number of Black deans that we have and Black women deans. Is that same trend happening in the presidencies, and what can you tell us about those trends?
So let me start with diversity that's not gender diversity. And I'll say for the purposes of the dissertation, I did not, we were during COVID, I did not survey the people that were identified to ask them to self-identify their race and ethnicity. So I didn't specifically report on that. What I did do was take a look at the ACE data. ACE, the American Council on Education, every 4 or 5 years, they do a study of the American presidency, and they do survey people. And while I found in general that my data collection on lawyer presidents far exceeded the number of lawyer presidents that they had in their surveys, and I can explain why. I used their data for race and ethnicity for purposes of having a conversation in the book, and I compared it to the American Bar Association census data for lawyers to see whether the percentage of, for example, Black lawyers matched the percentage of lawyer presidents. And it was pretty close based on that. But I think it might be better if I had asked people to self-identify, but that's just an anecdotal observation, but nothing that I had my own data collection for. I did look at gender, and there's a chapter in the book specifically on women lawyer presidents. And, I started in the 1970s. There were 3 women lawyer presidents in the 1970s. By the 2010s, there were 65. So far in the 2020s, there are 24 new women lawyer presidents and 26 total appointments. And so we're only 24 months we're now in month 25, the 2020s. And so, again, by extrapolating that and multiplying it times 5 to get us to the end of the decade, I think that we have a great story to tell. And I attribute part of that in the book. I talk about the rise of women in law school and the rise of women in the legal profession, which of course then goes over to the academy, as you just mentioned, and then it's going to go from there to the presidencies as well. But some of the women lawyer presidents were not from legal education.
Right.
And so some came from government and some came from the private sector, and they were in the right place at the right time with a great skill set and an open-minded board of trustees and appointing authority to recognize those leadership skills.
The figures are fascinating, and I know you've done your empirical research, and that a lot of that is included in the book, but you also mentioned your blog, lawyersleadinghighered.com, and you shared with me that that's where the human stories of the lawyers leading higher ed are, correct?
Correct. And so, to accompany the book, which again is very data driven, I set up a website that will keep the data up to date because the book was stagnant. The book came out the last half of December of 2022, which, I wanted to get the book out to press, but because it doesn't have a 2023 date, it already feels, that it's 2 weeks old, but a year old. But neither here nor there, I had to really close the data in late 2019, early 2020, in order to generate all of the charts and graphs so that I could do the analysis. And so
Okay.
all of that is explained in the book. And then it's up to date on this website, but also on the website, I put a blog where I post 2 stories every week about different lawyer presidents, and I talk about their backgrounds and, to the extent that, I can find what got them to the presidency or what they accomplished as lawyer presidents and what their pathway was. A lot of it, they're really inspiring stories. There was one guy, President Appel from Franklin and Marshall College. He was a member of the Board of Trustees. And the Board of Trustees, this is back in the 60s, the Board of Trustees gets rid of the president at the time, and the faculty is unhappy, and the board puts in one of their own, this lawyer who was on the board. And he stays in the position for 6 days and realizes that the way the process happened, he's never going to have the support of the faculty and the campus community. Regardless, he's an alum of the college. And I conclude at the end that his best leadership trait was knowing that it wasn't a fair process. There wasn't due process for the former president. The faculty weren't consulted. And so after 6 days, he tenders his resignation. He says, I'll wait until you find a new president, but I'm not going to stay. And that brought the campus together, and I'm not sure if somebody else who let an ego get in the way and didn't really think about what we think about as lawyers, of fairness and due process and bringing people together, I don't know if the result would have been the same if he wasn't a lawyer. And then, fast forward, Ellen Futter became the president of Barnard College, and these are all different stories on the blog. She becomes the president of Barnard when she was just a few years out of law school. She had actually been appointed to the Barnard Board of Trustees as a student rep, and then gets her own term following that, graduates from law school and goes to practice at Milbank Tweed, a Wall Street firm in New York City, still on the Board of Trustees. They have a crisis and a president leaving. The board needs to find somebody to put in that spot quickly. And they pick Ellen Futter 2 months before her 30th birthday. And she had an incredibly successful tenure as president at Barnard.
Amazing. Well, it's certainly not formulaic, right? How you get to a presidency or provost or even dean position. Let me ask you, you have such a breadth of leadership experiences in higher education. What is it you see as happening in the coming decade in legal education? How do you expect it is going to evolve?
I suspect there are going to be many challenges in legal education. I think that we all know that the ABA has removed for the future the requirement of the LSAT. In the idea of opening up the profession and whether or not the LSAT and other standardized exams may have disparate impacts for different communities and people of different socioeconomic status. We have really not come to grips with that on the bar exam, and the country and the law schools in the states are all over the place on what is the future of licensure, because it doesn't matter if you spend all of the money to go to law school in 3 or 4 years if you can't get that license at the end. And so that licensure has a big impact on the amount of freedom and flexibility that law schools have in terms of the curriculum and the experience for law students to go out and explore different things, because we also in legal education have an obligation to provide the environment for students that will pass that bar exam.
Yes.
So, it's going to be interesting to see which schools do and don't keep the LSAT, and whether there's pressure to get rid of it. And if people eliminate it, what are the factors that we're going to make decisions on as to whether somebody would make a good lawyer in the end? And so, it's almost like you don't like the exam and you don't like the licensure exam, which I've written plenty about with my own concerns about the bar exam and the need for bar exam reform. But we also have to make sure that just like a physician, you have to have some standards, and you have to have some acknowledgement of basic competencies. And so how we're going to address those competencies and how the curriculum may change to address that is going to be a challenge that I think law faculties and deans are going to grapple with for years to come.
Well, you've hit the nails on the head. These are the things that keep me up at night.
And the expense, right? Because, it's like anything. And I think one of the greatest challenges we have in higher education now, all of the bills for generally operating your building and your buildings, they're increasing. The utility costs are increasing. Materials, supplies, things that we purchase are increasing. As the economy has shifted and we've gone into the recession, call it what you want and describe it how you want. The cost of food has gone up. The cost of gasoline has gone up. The cost of purchasing a car, insurance has gone up, which means that salaries have to meet that because people have to earn a living wage.
Mm-hmm.
So as personnel and other than personnel costs go up, the way that most schools get their revenue is from tuition to meet that, plus whatever we can do as deans, provosts, and presidents to be good fundraisers, and to balance all of that. But access to education and keeping the debt load as low as possible to also match the starting salaries, which are all over the place.
Yeah.
And especially for those that go into public interest work, which we need. We can't strap those people with enormous amount of debt. And then there was all kinds of, machinations between the last presidential administration and the current presidential administration about where we stand with loan forgiveness and,
Yes.
How all of that is going to work. Very difficult issues, but those are the things that keep us up at night in higher education, because from a business standpoint, this all has to stay in balance and work together.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Certainly, in listening to all of those challenges we're facing, it's understandable but why lawyers are being tapped for leadership positions. And so if for anyone who wants to learn more about all of the comprehensive data that you've collected, the book is May It Please the Campus, Lawyers Leading Higher Education. And the blog is lawyersleadinghighered.com. Thank you so much, Dr. Salkin, for joining Aspen Leading Edge.
Thank you very much.